The winter of 1941 settled over the North Atlantic like a curtain of steel. The seas grew darker, the winds colder, and the sense of danger more present than ever before. In those months after the United States formally entered the war, German U-boats tightened their hold on the Atlantic trade routes that fed Britain's survival. Yet during this tense period, a lesser-known pattern began emerging among Allied naval officers. Strange signals, brief flashes of light, unusual Morse patterns, and unexplained radio pings, appearing across multiple convoys shortly before enemy attacks. These sightings weren't officially recorded, yet whispers spread quietly from bridge to bridge. Someone or something was signaling the enemy. Convoy operations were already a battle against the unknown. Fog, blackouts, and the constant fear of torpedoes created a relentless psychological strain. But when experienced signalmen aboard vessels such as HMS Campbell, HMS Harvester, and the U.S. destroyer USS Benson began reporting irregular signals, the situation escalated beyond ordinary wartime confusion. These men knew the difference between misfires, star reflections, and deliberate communication. The fact that so many incidents unfolded moments before U-boat attacks forced commanders to take them seriously. The struggle deepened when merchant crew logs revealed that these signals didn't follow any Allied recognition pattern, not Royal Navy protocol, not U.S. Navy signaling orders. Particularly troubling were the sightings on the night of January 18th, when Convoy SC-67, traveling from Halifax to Liverpool, lost 3 ships in coordinated attacks. Survivors remembered a short series of flashes, 3 long, 1 short, from an escort positioned at the convoy's perimeter. Minutes later, U-boat torpedoes found their targets with uncanny precision. Throughout the British Admiralty, analysts attempted to make sense of the pattern. Was it sabotage, enemy infiltration, or equipment malfunction? The Naval Intelligence Division opened what would later be labeled as an internal silent inquiry, meaning only a handful of officers were permitted to know of its existence. These were the same departments that managed the ultra-secret, the decoding operations at Bletchley Park. If convoy signals were being intercepted or mimicked, the consequences could be catastrophic. It would mean the Germans might not only know Allied convoy movement but possess insight into their communication systems. A partially decrypted entry from a Royal Navy operational diary reads, "Multiple convoy groups report unexplained signaling consistent with neither Allied nor enemy protocol. Pattern correlation suggests coordination. Source unknown." The note was unsigned and no follow-up was officially attached. To understand the weight of such reports, one must recall the situation in the Atlantic at the time. The Kriegsmarine's U-boats operated in coordinated wolf packs, guided by Enigma-coded transmissions. Allied convoys relied on secrecy, unpredictability, and disciplined communication. A single breach in coded traffic could turn a convoy from a formation of protection into a line of targets. Some officers believed these unexplained signals were simply errors, Aldous lamps flickering under harsh weather, fatigued operators sending unintended flashes. Others suspected German reconnaissance aircraft shadowing convoys and relaying information through methods the Allies had yet to understand. But a small minority believed something darker, that inside the Allied naval network, there were individuals sending coded warnings to the enemy, double agents embedded in the chaos of war. Yet even these theories failed to explain all incidents. For example, during convoy on 56 near Greenland, both the merchant vessel SS Empire Byron and the escort corvette HMS Rhododendron reported signals that neither claimed responsibility for, and both vessels later sustained coordinated torpedo attacks. There were no aircraft overhead. No known U-boats within scanning distance until the attack began. By the end of 1941, British command faced a deeply concerning possibility. Either the enemy had discovered a way to read or imitate Allied signals, or the signals had never been Allied in the first place. Modern naval historians still debate the origin of these unexplained messages. Some believe electromagnetic interference from early radar could have caused accidental lamp activation. Others argue that German U-boat captains experimented with reflective signaling to communicate with each other without radio detection. And a small group of researchers insist the timing was too precise to be coincidence. In wartime, unanswered questions become dangerous. Every unexplained flash, every irregular radio pulse, every unknown pattern left commanders with the lingering thought, what if the enemy was watching closer than anyone realized? The Admiralty quietly expanded its investigation. Ships would now be monitored, communications logged, and suspicious patterns traced. The Atlantic War was entering a new phase, not only fought with depth charges and torpedoes, but with deception, code breaking, and signals whose origin remained unknown. And soon, in the spring of 1943, one convoy would bring this mystery into sharp focus: Convoy HX-229. March 1943 marked one of the darkest periods in the Battle of the Atlantic. The German U-boat fleet was at its peak strength, and Allied losses grew by the day. In this tense atmosphere, Convoy HX-229 departed New York, bound for Liverpool. It carried more than 40 merchant vessels transporting fuel, ammunition, aircraft parts, and vital food supplies, cargo considered essential to Britain's survival. Escorting the convoy was a mixed force of Royal Navy and U.S. Navy ships, including the British corvette HMS Anemone, the destroyer HMS Highlander, and the American destroyer escort USS Greer. What none of them knew was that this journey would become one of the most documented cases of unexplained convoy signals during the war. The first days at sea were routine. The convoy kept silent running, blackout conditions in effect. Signal lamps were covered, radio transmissions restricted to short-range encrypted bursts. But as the convoy pushed deeper into the mid-Atlantic, known among sailors as the Black Pit, where air cover could not reach, strange activity began. On the night of March 15th, lookouts aboard HMS Anemone reported brief flashes coming from a merchant ship positioned 3 columns to port. The flashes were too controlled to be random reflection, too structured to be ignored. 3 long, 1 short, repeated twice. The signal team checked protocol. No wartime recognition pattern matched it. Less than 2 hours later, hydrophone operators detected movement below the convoy. The Wolfpack ROBgraph, led by U-boat commanders Otto von Bülow, Fritz Posk, and George Lassen, had found them with unusual precision. Torpedoes struck the SS Harry Luckenbach and SS Nariva almost simultaneously. Survivors swore they saw faint flashes again, this time from the opposite side of the convoy, seconds before the attack. Journal entries from Midshipman Arthur Collins of HMS Anemone recorded: no logical explanation. Lamps secure. Batteries checked. Nobody signaling. And yet the pattern returned, same timing, same location relative to attack. The escorts attempted countermeasures. Depth charges were deployed. ASTIC sonar scans swept the waters. But the U-boat struck again the next night with pinpoint accuracy, as if guided by someone who knew the convoy's defensive rotation. HMS Highlander reported receiving radio interference, short encrypted bursts, yet none originated from Allied equipment. The unanswered question grew heavier: were these signals coming from inside the convoy, or simply meant to look like they were? Some officers suspected internal sabotage. Others believed the Germans had developed a method of detecting light leaks or radar signatures invisible to the human eye. A few theorized that German reconnaissance aircraft, FW-200 Condors, had shadowed the convoy before it entered the Black Pit. But the timing remained too precise to dismiss as chance. The struggle escalated when another set of lights appeared, again from HMS Anemone's recorded line of sight. This time the signal team responded with a challenge code. No reply. Minutes later, another torpedo landed, this one striking the tanker SS Britain steamship. The explosion lit the ocean in an orange inferno. Lieutenant James Fairchild later recalled: it felt as though someone was marking targets. Whether intentional or accidental, the coordination was undeniable. The mystery deepened when, during post-attack confusion, multiple ships reported seeing the signals, not from a single vessel, but from shifting points across the convoy formation. If a saboteur existed, they were either mobile, undetected, or the signals were merely illusions amplified by adrenaline and darkness. By March 19th, 8 ships were lost. Yet the final unexplained event occurred the night before the convoy broke into safer waters. HMS Anemone recorded the same pattern, 3 long flashes, 1 short, but this time, it appeared far beyond the convoy, as if coming from the horizon. No U-boats attacked after that moment. Was it a German signal instructing withdrawal? A decoy meant to terrify Allied crews? Or evidence of coordinated communication the Allies never fully understood? Convoy HX-229 eventually reached Liverpool Harbor, scarred, reduced, and carrying more questions than answers. Reports were filed, but many details remained unofficial, exchanged only in quiet conversations between officers who couldn't ignore what they witnessed. Modern historians still debate the cause. Some suggest misinterpreted Aldous lamp reflections. Others believe the Germans exploited newly discovered radar interference. And a smaller group argues that covert human intelligence networks may have played a role, operating far closer to the convoys than anyone realized. For now, the record remains incomplete. But the unanswered signals of Convoy HX-229 would soon draw the attention of British intelligence, and trigger a classified investigation aimed at uncovering the truth. And that investigation would lead to even deeper mysteries. By the summer of 1943, the Admiralty could no longer dismiss the mounting reports. The mysterious flashes observed across convoys, particularly in the case of HX-229, could not be written off as coincidence, weather phenomena, or human error. Something deeper was at work, and every unanswered signal meant more ships, lives, and supplies at risk. The investigation began quietly inside the Admiralty's Operational Intelligence Center in London. Behind a secure door marked only with the number 39, analysts from the Royal Navy Signals Branch and MI6 gathered to compare logs, survivor testimonies, and encrypted message intercepts. Only a select handful of officers, a circle much smaller than the famous ultra-code-breaking team at Bletchley Park, knew the true purpose of the inquiry. Their working name for the case was Project Tidewatch. The first struggle came from a simple, uncomfortable question. Were the Germans reading Allied signals? If the Kriegsmarine had cracked Allied systems, then the entire Atlantic defense network was compromised. Initial comparisons showed no evidence that the Enigma-protected convoy codes had been exposed. In fact, ultra-decrypts indicated that German U-boats complained frequently about lack of convoy intelligence. Yet the timing of sightings and attacks still defied probability. To broaden the scope, MI6 sent operatives to Halifax, Liverpool, Boston, and Clyde naval bases to inspect communication practices. They interviewed signalmen, convoy officers, merchant captains, anyone who might recall behavior that seemed unusual or out of place. The same patterns resurfaced: unexplained lamp flashes, unrecorded radio pulses, and attacks striking shortly after sightings. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence emerged from the logbook of Lieutenant Commander Harold Wells, communication officer aboard HMS Vervain. In neat handwriting he recorded, "This signal did not originate from any Allied vessel. Its pattern was neither random nor accidental. Purpose implied. Meaning unknown." Such notes were never meant for official reports. This was fear written privately. Historical context added further weight. British authorities had previously uncovered German spy networks in North America, Operation Pastorius in 1942 being the most notorious case. Although the FBI dismantled it before damage was done, it demonstrated intent. Germany was actively trying to place informants inside Allied ports, shipyards, and merchant operations. As MI6 sifted through captured documents, they identified a reference in a partially decrypted Kriegsmarine signal describing Lichtführung, light guidance, from convoy formations. It wasn't clear whether this meant active signaling or merely observed patterns. But the phrasing was enough to raise alarm. Then came the first significant reveal. During an interrogation at Camp 020, Britain's intelligence facility for enemy agents, a captured German naval signals officer recalled hearing U-boat captains speak of a system where small errors in Allied signaling could be exploited to track formations. He described how misdialed radio frequencies and misaligned Aldous lamp shutters created detectable patterns, even when operators believed they had followed blackout protocol. His exact words: "Sometimes the enemy tells you where they are, not intentionally but because war is loud, frantic, and imperfect." The implication was extraordinary. The Germans might not have needed spies or cracking machines. They could have been reading mistakes. But this explanation did not satisfy the investigators entirely. Many logs included observations of patterns repeated exactly, too deliberate to be accidental. Anomalies such as perfectly timed repetition, symmetry in flashes, or transmissions positioned at the convoy perimeter stretched beyond the margin of operational chaos. That led MI6 to pursue a darker line of inquiry: possible infiltration. They examined the backgrounds of signal officers, wireless operators, and merchant marine crew with access to convoy movements. The majority were loyal, with verifiable service records. Yet, a few individuals stood out: brief gaps in employment, foreign travel, vague references in naval clearance forms. Nothing conclusive, nothing prosecutable, but enough to deepen suspicion. An internal note from Admiral Sir Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief Western Approaches, summed up the dilemma. "We are hunting a threat we cannot define. The danger may be mechanical, accidental, or human, but until confirmed, it remains a ghost we must treat as real." Modern naval scholars often reflect on this moment. The war had evolved beyond torpedoes and depth charges. The Atlantic was becoming an arena of intelligence, counterintelligence, and unseen signals shaping life and death decisions. Yet despite months of investigation, the origin of the unexplained convoy signals remained unresolved. That would change in 1944, not through interrogation or analysis, but but through something far more unexpected: the capture of a German U-boat and the documents it carried. Inside those pages, the mystery deepened, not toward an answer, but toward an even more chilling question. What if the Germans weren't just reading Allied signals? What if they had learned to predict them? On June 4, 1944, in the mid-Atlantic waters near Cape Verde, the German submarine U-505 surfaced violently after a prolonged depth charge attack by Task Group 22.3, an American hunter-killer unit led by Captain Daniel Gallery. It was one of the few moments in the war when a U-boat was captured intact. For Allied command, it was a victory, but for intelligence services, it was something far more valuable: an unexpected window into a hidden side of German naval strategy. Inside the U-boat's cramped compartments, American sailors uncovered maps, cipher sheets, Enigma components, and handwritten operational notes. Among them were documents that would later become central to the ongoing inquiry into unexplained convoy signals. One folder in particular carried a handwritten title: Echo Muster, Pattern Echo. The name alone struck investigators as unusual. Echo, in naval communication, referred to repeated or reflected signals, not originating but responding. As analysts reviewed the captured papers, they discovered diagrams of convoy formations marked not with ship names, but with shorthand symbols, arrows, dots, and patterns similar to Morse timing structures. One section described methods for interpreting inconsistent lamp flashes or intermittent radio interference. The notes suggested that U-boat captains had been encouraged to record irregular signals from Allied convoys, not because they believed Allied forces were intentionally communicating, but because repeated patterns could reveal spacing, speed, and alignment. A chilling annotation stood out: uncertainty is a map. If repeated, it is a guide. The struggle for clarity deepened. If these papers were accurate, German wolfpacks weren't just attacking convoys, they were studying them, learning how inconsistency in Allied communication systems could serve as unintended guidance. The insight shifted the investigation's focus. Instead of assuming sabotage or enemy agents aboard Allied ships, analysts began to explore whether Allied technology itself, imperfect, rushed, and rapidly evolving, had contributed to the mystery. The introduction of new equipment such as Type 271 radar and HF/DF, high-frequency direction finding, known as HF/DUF, often created unintended signal leakage. Inexperienced operators under combat stress sometimes sent fragmented Morse sequences or failed to extinguish signaling lamps entirely during night alerts. What had been dismissed as harmless operational error now appeared to have provided the Kriegsmarine with intelligence opportunities. The revelations were supported by scattered entries from U-boat captain diaries recovered across multiple captures. Kapitänleutnant Hans Rudolf Rosing wrote, "We could not always see them, but we knew they were there. The lights spoke, not clearly but enough." Another captain, Werner Henke of U-515, described using binoculars to detect faint rhythmic flashes from convoy formations, he believed caused by lamplight shield gaps or repeated mechanical vibration patterns. Yet not all the German notes supported the theory of passive interpretation. Some referenced signals with no environmental or mechanical explanation. A U-boat log from March 1943 included a curious line: "Observed 3 long, 1 short, same pattern as last week. We did not signal back." This entry matched the same unexplained pattern reported in Convoy HX 229. With these findings, British and American analysts faced a difficult question. Was pattern echo entirely observational, or had the Germans developed signaling techniques designed to mimic or trigger Allied responses? If the latter was true, it meant the Kriegsmarine had engaged in what modern strategists would call signal manipulation, deliberately sending ambiguous flashes or radio bursts in the hopes Allied operators would respond instinctively, revealing position or code. Admiral Sir Max Horton summarized the implications in a private dispatch. "Whether deliberate or derivative, the enemy has weaponized confusion." Even with the intelligence from U-505, the mystery was not resolved. Some recorded signals remained too synchronized, too deliberately structured to be accidents. And the idea that German submarines were testing behavioral response patterns carried unsettling psychological implications. A modern reflection emerges here. War does not only target ships or soldiers, it targets assumptions. The unexplained signals challenged the foundational principle of naval warfare at the time: that silence ensured safety. Instead, silence had been imperfect, and imperfection had become vulnerability. Yet despite these findings, one deeper unresolved question remained. If the Germans only interpreted signals, then who or what had originated the earliest flashes reported? To answer that, investigators looked not outward to the enemy, but inward, toward Allied ports, crew rosters and communication officers with access to convoy schedules. The hunt would shift from the open ocean to the shadows of intelligence networks. And with it, the mystery would grow darker still. As the war drew closer to its final phases in late 1944, the focus of the unexplained convoy signal investigation shifted away from the open ocean and toward an unsettling possibility: human involvement. If German U-boats had methods to interpret or exploit signal irregularities, then someone somewhere could have intentionally amplified or initiated those signals. British Security Service MI5 and U.S. Naval Intelligence began a quiet review of personnel linked to convoy movements. They examined communication officers, merchant captains, maintenance crews, and especially those assigned to ports known for high losses: Liverpool, Belfast, New York, and Halifax. Records were rechecked, service histories audited, and foreign contacts investigated. But rather than discovering a clear saboteur, the investigation instead revealed inconsistencies. Men reassigned rapidly without explanation, operators with incomplete documentation, and individuals whose wartime duties were known only under code names. It wasn't proof, but it suggested a hidden layer of intelligence operations that even military commanders weren't fully briefed on. The struggle to separate rumor from evidence grew heavier when the first post-war interrogations of captured Kriegsmarine officers began. One of them, Captain Zur See Heinz Schaefer, a respected U-boat commander, spoke candidly during questioning at an intelligence facility near London. When asked about reports of light-based signals seen inside Allied convoys, he initially dismissed them as British imagination. But after seeing translated copies of Allied logs, he paused before responding. "We sometimes believed there were signals between the ships. But we did not trust it. The Atlantic plays tricks on men." Another officer, Oberleutnant Karl Fuchs, offered a different perspective. "Some U-boat captains swore they saw signals meant for us. Light on the horizon, repeating. Maybe sabotage. Maybe mischief. Maybe something only wartime fear magnified." These conflicting accounts fueled uncertainty rather than clarity. Insight emerged from a different angle: merchant sailor testimonies. Many recalled working under extreme fatigue, navigating pitch-black waters, hands numb from cold as they operated signal lamps and radios. Even minor deviations could produce accidental patterns: a loose shutter, a trembling hand, a miscalibrated switch. Yet some veteran wireless operators insisted these incidents could not be human error. One, a Canadian radio officer named Samuel Briggs, described an event off Iceland. It wasn't random. The flashes had spacing, timing. Someone knew what they were doing. His account mirrored statements from sailors across 4 separate convoys, each claiming the signal seemed intentional and repeated precisely. The reveal deepened when historians later discovered post-war German memoirs that referenced a rumored intelligence chain operating in Allied ports, not proven, but whispered among U-boat crews. Some attributed convoy coordination to sympathizers in Ireland, Spain, or Argentina. Others claimed German merchant vessels interned early in the war had stored intelligence before being seized. None of these theories fully explained the timing or consistency of the mysterious signals. A modern application of intelligence analysis suggests a combination of factors: partial signal interception, environmental optical illusions, operator error, evolving technology, and psychological strain converging into a phenomenon that felt coordinated, even if it wasn't. But one detail remains haunting. Multiple German U-boat captains independently reported seeing signals they did not order, signals that seemed to pass between ships far beyond visual range. Some believed them Allied mishaps. Others thought they were decoys. A small number quietly wondered if another German vessel or agent was communicating without their knowledge. One diary entry simply read, "Light speaks. But to whom?" By early 1945, as Allied dominance at sea increased, the mystery faded, not because answers emerged but because the attacks stopped. The improvement of escort tactics, long-range air cover, and advanced radar left U-boats vulnerable and desperate. Whatever mechanism, intentional or accidental, had fueled the unexplained convoy signals ceased to matter in the face of overwhelming operational change. And yet, even decades later, military historians and naval researchers continue to debate the origin of those signals. No confirmed spy was ever identified. No conclusive system discovered. No single explanation accepted. The war ended with a silence that did not resolve the question, only preserved it. But before investigators closed their files, one last entry was written in the final internal report. Some patterns remain unexplained. Whether born of error, sabotage, or circumstance, they served their purpose. The enemy listened even when no one meant to speak. With the guns quiet and the oceans finally free of wolf packs, one mystery still lingered. And it leads to the final chapter, where the unanswered becomes legacy, and the unexplained becomes history. When the war finally ended in 1945, the Atlantic Ocean, once the deadliest battlefield on Earth, grew quiet again. Ships no longer traveled in blackout conditions. Convoys dissolved, U-boats surrendered, and ports reopened under peacetime routines. Yet among the thousands of after-action documents, intercepted Enigma traffic and wartime diaries, one topic remained unresolved: the unexplained signals witnessed across multiple Allied convoys. Reports existed. Testimonies existed. Patterns existed. But no definitive source was ever proven. The hook lay in the final official review. In early 1946, a classified committee composed of British, American, and Canadian naval analysts assembled at the Admiralty in London. Their task was not military strategy, it was interpretation. They reviewed every known incident from the previous 4 years. Unexplained lamp flashes, strange radio bursts, rhythmic light patterns seen just before German attacks, and German logs referencing unknown communications. The struggle of the committee became evident quickly. Every theory carried contradictions. If the signals were sabotage, then why was no spy ever identified or arrested? If they were accidental, why did multiple convoys report identical patterns across different oceans and months? If they were German manipulation, then how were they visible within Allied formations? The committee soon realized that the mystery was not a single phenomenon, but the result of intersecting wartime variables. To provide structure, they divided potential causes into 4 categories. 1. Operational human error. Operators under stress could misfire signals or accidentally expose covered lamps. Sleep deprivation during long stretches at sea often led to involuntary mistakes. Witness accounts described hands trembling in cold Atlantic winds, shutters loosening under rough seas, and radios sending partially keyed Morse. 2. Technological interference. New radar systems, Type 291 search sets, early VHF communications, and experimental radio frequency equipment occasionally leaked signals or caused unintended feedback. Some patterns may have been electromagnetic anomalies created by overlapping systems not yet well understood. 3. Enemy observation and psychological projection. Captured U-boat records confirmed that German commanders occasionally interpreted random flashes or reflections as intentional signals. Meanwhile, Allied crews, knowing enemies lurked unseen, were primed to interpret coincidence as conspiracy. 4. Unknown or classified Allied operations. Some signals may have resulted from covert Allied testing of communication systems, not publicly acknowledged for security reasons. Signals intelligence divisions often compartmentalized research even from Naval Command. As the committee continued, they found that the deeper they examined the mystery, the more it blurred between explanation and uncertainty. Insight emerged from one final witness, a retired Royal Navy signal officer named Harold Whitmore, who had served aboard destroyers in several high-risk convoys. In a late interview, he stated quietly, "The war was chaos disguised as control. Sometimes we believed we saw patterns because we feared there were patterns." Yet he added something else. "But some signals, those weren't fear. Those were intentional." His 2 sentences summarized the core paradox. During closing review, one analyst referenced German Captain Werner Lott, who had remarked during interrogation, "We never knew if the lights were meant for us. We only knew they appeared before opportunity." This single line made the committee pause. It implied that whether the signals were intentional or accidental, they held meaning, not inherently but functionally. If a U-boat captain saw a rhythmic flash moments before a convoy altered course or speed, it could influence tactical interpretation and movement. The signal did not need intentional purpose to alter wartime outcomes. The reveal of the committee's final written assessment reflected this ambiguity. Most observed signals were likely the product of operational stress, environmental distortion, and misinterpreted coincidence. A smaller number may have originated from equipment malfunction or experimental communication systems. A very limited subset remains unexplained. It was a carefully phrased conclusion, neither confirming sabotage nor ruling it out. The modern reflection is simple. The Battle of the Atlantic was not only a contest of torpedoes and sonar, but of perception, interpretation, and uncertainty. In an environment where survival depended on vigilance, even the faintest flash could feel like a warning or a threat. Naval historians continue to revisit the records. Advances in cognitive psychology, signal theory, and communication technology offer new interpretations. Yet the key detail endures. No one ever identified a definitive source for the earliest unexplained patterns. And so the mystery survived, not erased, but preserved in margins, whispers, and archived reports. The final entry in the classified file reads, "War leaves stories without endings. Some are forgotten. Some are buried. Some remain open not because they were unsolved, but because they were never meant to be fully understood." The unexplained convoy signals of World War II now belong to that final category, resting somewhere between documented history and unanswered wartime silence. A silence that, like the Atlantic itself, still holds its secrets.